In August 1943, Japanese flight logs from the Solomon Islands area began to contain similar entries that had not appeared before. In the enemy contact columns, pilots recorded the presence of a fighter that did not correspond to any American type previously identified in earlier months. The reports noted an unusual wing shape, a large propeller assembly, and attacks initiated from altitude that ended with a rapid increase in speed and a withdrawal from combat without prolonged maneuvering. The duration of contact was brief, the closing distance limited, and pursuit was almost always broken off. In several units operating independently of one another, pilots during the same period recorded a similar sequence of events: the appearance of the enemy from above, a single attack, and loss of contact. At the same time, American bombers that had previously often operated with minimal escort were now accompanied by fighters for the entire length of their routes. Some reports stated that the enemy did not accept combat at low speeds and did not enter horizontal turning engagements, even when Japanese aircraft were nearby. Training materials from the same period began to include new silhouettes, but without detailed explanation. Situation summaries used cautious phrasing, and certain characteristics were repeated without clarification. The entries continued to accumulate, but they did not contain answers. During the first half of 1943, aerial operations across the South and Central Pacific continued under conditions defined by extended distances, limited intelligence, and the progressive introduction of new aircraft types by both sides. Japanese naval and army air units operating from island bases and forward fields encountered increasing numbers of American fighters whose characteristics differed from those previously observed. Reports compiled by Japanese air commands in the Solomon Islands, New Guinea, and surrounding operational zones began to note the appearance of a large single-engine fighter with inverted gull wings, radial engine, and distinctive landing gear configuration. These aircraft were first encountered sporadically during escort missions, interception attempts, and defensive patrols near American-held islands and advancing amphibious forces. The aircraft later identified through visual recognition manuals and intelligence summaries as the American F4U Corsair was initially observed at altitude during escort operations supporting bomber formations. Japanese pilots flying Mitsubishi A-6M fighters and other types reported difficulty in closing distance during high-speed dives and noted that the aircraft retained velocity during disengagement. Operational logs recorded that the unfamiliar fighter could initiate combat at speeds that exceeded those previously encountered from American carrier-based aircraft in the same regions. Early sightings occurred near Guadalcanal and surrounding waters, where American land-based air units were expanding operations from captured airfields. Japanese reconnaissance summaries compiled in mid-1943 included sketches and technical notes based on pilot observations. These documents identified the aircraft's large propeller diameter, wide wingspan, and rapid climb when power was applied. Reports described instances in which the aircraft executed diving attacks from higher altitude and withdrew without prolonged turning engagements. Japanese pilots recorded that attempts to pursue often resulted in rapid separation. Maintenance officers and intelligence personnel collated these accounts, noting differences from earlier American fighters such as the P-40 and F-4F. As American operations progressed northward through the Solomon chain, Corsair units became more frequently encountered. Marine Corps squadrons operating from land bases flew missions including bomber escort, ground attack, and combat air patrol. Japanese air units tasked with intercepting these operations filed increasing numbers of contact reports involving the same aircraft type. Flight logs indicated that engagement ranges expanded, with American fighters initiating attacks from above and disengaging vertically. Japanese pilots reported that sustained turning engagements were uncommon, and that the aircraft often avoided prolonged low-speed maneuvering. By late summer 1943, Japanese air commands in Rabaul and surrounding areas issued memoranda addressing the presence of the new American fighter. These documents instructed pilots to recognize the inverted gull wing and to anticipate high-speed attacks from altitude. Tactical bulletins advised against extended dives, believing that recovery at high speed was limited in certain Japanese aircraft. The memoranda contained procedural language rather than assessment, listing observed behaviors and recommending specific engagement parameters based on recorded encounters. Japanese pilot training units incorporated these observations into instructional materials. Training syllabi emphasized identification and avoidance techniques rather than detailed performance comparisons. Pilots were advised to maintain situational awareness at higher altitudes where the American fighter was frequently observed. Reports from combat units continued to feed into centralized intelligence offices, where analysts compared field reports against captured documents and aircraft recognition guides. During operations over New Britain and Bougainville, Japanese pilots encountered Corsairs in increasing numbers. After-action reports noted that the American fighters were frequently present during daylight hours and operated in coordinated formations. The aircraft's ability to escort bombers over extended distances was recorded in mission summaries. Japanese interceptors often arrived to find the American formation already protected by multiple layers of fighter cover. In several recorded engagements, Japanese pilots reported that the Corsair executed steep climbing turns following diving passes, regaining altitude rapidly. These maneuvers were documented in flight logs and corroborated by multiple unit reports. Japanese maintenance and technical officers compiled these observations into internal documents without interpretive language, focusing on observable characteristics such as climb rate, dive speed, and apparent structural durability during high-speed maneuvers. By early 1944, American air operations expanded into the Bismarck Sea and northern New Guinea. Corsair units were now operating from a network of airfields supporting amphibious landings. Japanese air defenses, already strained by logistical limitations, encountered the aircraft in both offensive and defensive contexts. Reconnaissance flights attempting to observe American naval movements reported encounters with the same fighter type conducting patrols over fleet elements. Japanese naval aviation units based in the Philippines and Mariana Approaches began receiving intelligence summaries referencing Corsair activity further south. These summaries included descriptions derived from combat reports and aerial photography. The aircraft was noted as having a broad nose and distinctive wing shape, with performance characteristics that allowed it to intercept at altitude and withdraw rapidly. Intelligence officers circulated these summaries to operational units as part of routine information dissemination. During combat over the Admiralty Islands and later over Palau, Japanese pilots continued to file reports noting difficulty in achieving firing positions against the American fighter. Engagement descriptions emphasized short, high-speed encounters with limited opportunity for sustained combat. Aircraft damage reports occasionally referenced hits received during brief firing windows before separation. These documents were archived alongside mission logs and pilot debriefings. The increasing presence of Corsairs coincided with changes in American air tactics observed by Japanese units. Bombing missions were more consistently escorted, and fighter patrols were maintained over newly established beachheads. Japanese pilots tasked with reconnaissance or interception recorded frequent contact with American fighters before reaching primary objectives. The reports did not assign causes or outcomes beyond the immediate events, adhering to standardized reporting formats. Japanese technical intelligence sections attempted to estimate performance parameters based on observed behavior. These estimates were circulated internally with cautionary language, noting that values were approximations derived from combat observation. The documents focused on speed ranges, climb tendencies, and armament effects as inferred from visible gunfire and damage patterns. No evaluative conclusions were included beyond the data presented. By mid-1944, Corsairs were encountered during operations near the Mariana Islands. Japanese air units flying from Saipan, Tinian, and Guam recorded engagements with American fighters operating from carriers and land bases. Mission reports described the aircraft's ability to maintain patrols for extended periods. Pilots noted that the aircraft often appeared in groups supporting bomber formations and conducting sweeps over airfields. In several instances, Japanese pilots reported observing Corsairs performing low-level attacks against ground targets following air engagements. These actions were recorded in operational logs as part of daily summaries. Damage assessments from ground units noted strafing impacts consistent with heavy-caliber machine gun fire. These observations were compiled without commentary, forming part of routine intelligence records. Japanese Air Command communications reflected an administrative response to the recurring encounters. Orders emphasized adherence to engagement protocols and reinforced recognition training. Bulletins distributed to squadrons contained diagrams and silhouettes of the Corsair alongside other American aircraft types. These materials were intended to standardize identification across units operating in different theaters. As American forces advanced toward the Philippines, Corsairs became a common element in air encounters reported by Japanese pilots in the region. Flight records from late 1944 included multiple entries noting contact with the same aircraft type during escort and patrol missions. The records maintained consistent terminology and avoided descriptive embellishment, focusing on time, location, altitude, and outcome. Throughout these operations, Japanese pilots continued to document their experiences in accordance with established procedures. The cumulative record reflected repeated exposure to the American fighter across multiple theaters and mission types. The documents preserved from this period consist of mission logs, intelligence summaries, training memoranda, and technical notes, all of which record the presence and behavior of the Corsair as observed during ongoing combat operations. During the latter months of 1944, Japanese air operations across the Western Pacific proceeded under conditions of increasing contact frequency with American carrier and land-based aviation. The F4U Corsair appeared regularly in operational reports originating from Formosa, the Philippines, and the approaches to the Ryukyu Islands. Japanese naval air groups assigned to fleet defense and interception duties recorded encounters with the aircraft during daylight patrols and during attempts to disrupt American strike formations. These reports were transmitted through standard channels to regional air commands and compiled into daily and weekly summaries. Flight logs from Japanese units operating out of Luzon described repeated sightings of Corsairs conducting fighter sweeps ahead of bomber formations. Pilots noted that the aircraft frequently operated at higher altitudes than the bombers they escorted. Engagements typically began with diving attacks initiated by the American fighters. Japanese pilots recorded that these attacks were executed with limited warning and concluded rapidly, with the attacking aircraft regaining altitude after a single pass. The reports focused on sequence and timing, noting altitude differentials and relative positions at the moment of contact. Japanese reconnaissance flights tasked with observing American naval movements encountered Corsairs performing combat air patrols over task forces. Mission reports indicated that these fighters maintained spacing and altitude discipline consistent with established American procedures. Japanese pilots attempting to approach within observation range often recorded interception by the same aircraft type before completing reconnaissance runs. These encounters were logged as aborted missions or partial observations, with details limited to time, position, and reason for disengagement. Technical sections within Japanese air commands continued to collect and organize combat reports related to the Corsair. These sections produced internal memoranda summarizing observed characteristics, including apparent speed during dives, climb behavior after attack, and stability during high-speed maneuvers. The memoranda avoided interpretive language and instead listed recurring observations drawn from multiple unit reports. Where discrepancies appeared between accounts, they were noted without resolution. During operations over Leyte Gulf, Japanese air units encountered Corsairs in large numbers. Mission records from this period show that the aircraft was present during escort missions, patrols, and ground attack sorties. Japanese pilots flying intercept missions reported difficulty in penetrating the fighter screen protecting American bombers. Engagements were recorded as brief and dispersed, with limited opportunity for coordinated attacks. These observations were entered into after-action reports in standardized format. Ground units on Leyte and neighboring islands reported strafing attacks consistent with the profile of the Corsair. Damage reports described impacts from heavy machine gun fire on vehicles, supply dumps, and airfield installations. These reports were forwarded to Air Command Headquarters and incorporated into operational summaries. The documents did not attribute outcomes beyond the physical effects observed at the time of reporting. Japanese airfield defense units noted the presence of Corsairs conducting low-altitude passes over runways and dispersal areas. Logs maintained by airfield personnel recorded times and directions of approach, altitude estimates, and the duration of each pass. These logs were used to coordinate anti-aircraft responses and to inform air raid warnings. The aircraft's distinctive silhouette was frequently mentioned in identification columns. As American operations expanded northward from the Philippines, Corsairs were encountered over the South China Sea and along coastal regions of Formosa. Japanese pilots assigned to maritime patrols recorded sightings of the aircraft operating from carriers positioned offshore. Reports noted that the fighters maintained patrol patterns over extended periods. Japanese attempts to approach shipping lanes were often interrupted by interception. Training units within Japan received updated intelligence bulletins summarizing encounters with the Corsair. These bulletins included revised recognition guides and procedural notes based on recent combat reports. Instructors incorporated this material into classroom instruction and flight training exercises. Emphasis was placed on early detection and avoidance of unfavorable engagement conditions, reflecting the patterns documented in operational reports. By early 1945, Japanese air operations were increasingly defensive in nature. Corsairs were reported during raids on airfields, ports, and transportation networks. Japanese pilots flying intercept missions over the home island's approaches recorded encounters with the aircraft as part of larger American formations. Mission logs documented altitude, heading, and engagement duration, with no commentary beyond immediate observations. Naval aviation units operating from Kyushu and Shikoku noted Corsair activity during American carrier strikes. Reconnaissance and interception attempts were frequently met by fighter opposition. Japanese pilots recorded that the American fighters maintained formation integrity during engagements. These details were included in post-mission debriefings and transcribed into unit records. Japanese technical officers continued to analyze damage reports from aircraft that returned after engagements with Corsairs. Maintenance logs described entry and exit points consistent with heavy-caliber machine gun fire. These logs were used to inform repair procedures and to update vulnerability assessments. The documentation remained descriptive, focusing on structural effects and repair actions taken. During the Battle of Okinawa, Corsairs were a constant presence in Japanese operational reporting. Air units assigned to defend the island and surrounding waters encountered the aircraft during patrols, escort missions, and ground attack operations. Mission summaries recorded repeated contacts throughout the day, often involving multiple American fighter types operating together. The Corsair was identified by its wing configuration and engine profile. Japanese pilots flying from southern Kyushu recorded encounters with Corsairs during attempts to reach American naval forces near Okinawa. Engagements were described as occurring at various altitudes, with American fighters initiating contact. Japanese mission outcomes were logged in accordance with established procedures, noting aircraft losses, damage, and mission completion status. Ground observers and anti-aircraft units on Okinawa reported frequent low-level attacks by Corsairs against defensive positions. These reports included times, directions, and observed effects. The information was consolidated into daily situation reports forwarded to higher command. The reports maintained a factual tone, listing events as recorded without further analysis. Throughout this period, Japanese Air Command communications reflected ongoing adjustments to operational planning in response to American air activity. Orders emphasized coordination between fighter units and ground defenses. Recognition materials were updated to include variations of the Corsair observed in different markings and configurations. These materials were distributed through official channels to ensure consistency across units. The accumulation of reports from multiple theaters provided a comprehensive record of Corsair activity as observed by Japanese forces. The documents from this phase include flight logs, reconnaissance summaries, maintenance records, training bulletins, and command communications. Each entry reflects the immediate circumstances of contact, preserving a chronological account of encounters as they occurred during ongoing operations. From the opening months of 1945, Japanese air operations continued under conditions marked by persistent American air presence across multiple operational zones. Reports originating from air units assigned to the defense of the home islands, the East China Sea approaches, and remaining forward positions consistently referenced encounters with American fighters identified as Corsairs. These reports were compiled daily and transmitted through established command channels, maintaining standardized formats that emphasized chronology, location, and aircraft behavior. Japanese naval air units operating from bases in southern Kyushu documented repeated sightings of Corsairs conducting patrols and escort missions in support of American carrier task forces positioned to the south and east. Flight records noted that these aircraft frequently appeared in advance of strike formations, maintaining altitude separation and lateral spacing. Interception attempts were recorded as being met by immediate fighter opposition. The reports listed engagement altitudes, headings, and duration, followed by aircraft status upon return. Reconnaissance missions dispatched to locate American naval concentrations encountered Corsairs operating as part of layered air defense. Japanese pilots reported being intercepted before reaching visual range of target formations. These encounters were logged as mission interruptions, with time and coordinates recorded. The documentation focused on procedural outcomes, such as fuel expenditure and mission termination points, without elaboration beyond operational necessity. During this period, Japanese airfield activity was increasingly subject to American fighter-bomber attacks. Corsairs were frequently identified in air raid logs maintained by base personnel. These logs recorded approach vectors, estimated altitude, and the number of attacking aircraft. Damage assessments compiled after each raid detailed craters, structural damage, and aircraft losses on the ground. The reports attributed observed effects to specific attack runs without broader commentary. Maintenance units supporting Japanese fighter squadrons compiled detailed records of aircraft damage sustained during engagements with American fighters. These records included diagrams indicating bullet impact locations, structural deformation, and systems affected. Entries referencing encounters with Corsairs noted consistent damage patterns associated with heavy machine gun fire. Repair actions were documented step by step, including parts replaced and time required to return aircraft to service. Training commands within Japan continued to revise instructional materials based on accumulated combat reports. Recognition manuals distributed to new pilots included updated silhouettes and profile drawings of the Corsair, reflecting variations observed in recent months. Training directives emphasized standardized reporting of encounters, ensuring that data collected in the field remained consistent and usable for intelligence compilation. As American forces intensified operations against shipping routes and coastal installations, Corsairs were recorded performing extended patrols over maritime approaches. Japanese maritime patrol units reported frequent sightings of the aircraft flying parallel to convoy routes. Attempts to shadow American task forces were often curtailed due to interception. These incidents were logged with precise timestamps and navigational references. In the East China Sea, Japanese air units operating from Formosa documented encounters with Corsairs during American strikes against ports and airfields. After-action reports noted that the fighters maintained close escort of bombers and conducted follow-on strafing attacks. Ground damage reports from affected installations listed impacts consistent with aerial machine gun fire. The documents adhered to established reporting language and avoided evaluative statements. Naval staff officers compiled weekly summaries aggregating reports from multiple air groups. These summaries included tabulated data showing frequency of encounters with specific American aircraft types, including the Corsair. The tables listed dates, locations, mission types, and engagement outcomes. Narrative sections were limited to factual sequencing of events as derived from unit submissions. Japanese pilots assigned to special attack units also recorded encounters with Corsairs during sortie attempts. Mission logs from these units noted interception points and defensive maneuvers observed. The reports maintained the same procedural structure as conventional unit records, documenting launch time, route, contact with enemy aircraft, and mission result. Throughout April and May 1945, the Battle of Okinawa generated a continuous stream of reports involving Corsairs. Japanese air units operating from remaining bases on Kyushu and nearby islands encountered the aircraft during attempts to reach American naval forces supporting the landings. Engagements were recorded as occurring across a wide range of altitudes and distances from the island. Mission summaries listed losses, damage, and partial mission completions without interpretive language. Ground units on Okinawa maintained detailed logs of air activity. Observers recorded repeated low-level attacks by Corsairs against troop positions, supply routes, and defensive emplacements. These observations were forwarded through command channels as part of daily situation reports. Each entry included time, direction of approach, and observed effects, adhering to standardized reporting formats. Anti-aircraft units coordinated their responses based on these logs. Firing records noted the number of rounds expended and estimated engagement altitude. Instances where aircraft were observed trailing smoke or altering course were recorded without confirmation of results. These records were preserved alongside air raid logs for reference. Japanese communications intercept units occasionally reported monitoring American radio traffic associated with fighter operations. Summaries of intercepted transmissions referenced call signs and activity patterns but did not include decoded content beyond procedural observations. These summaries were circulated to air commands as supplementary information. As the operational situation continued to deteriorate, Japanese air units faced increasing constraints on fuel, aircraft availability, and trained personnel. Despite these conditions, reporting procedures remained consistent. Encounters with Corsairs were documented with the same attention to detail as earlier in the conflict. Flight logs continued to list aircraft type identification based on visual recognition and engagement characteristics. By the final months of the war, Corsairs were present in reports from nearly all remaining Japanese air commands. The cumulative documentation from this period reflects a sustained pattern of contact across multiple theaters. The records consist of mission logs, damage reports, intelligence summaries, training directives, and command communications, each preserving the immediate details of encounters as they were observed and recorded at the time. From May 1945 onward, Japanese air and ground reporting in the Ryukyu and Kyushu sectors continues in the routine formats used during the Okinawa operation. Corsair activity is entered in multiple categories: fighter sweeps, combat air patrol, close escort, anti-shipping patrol, and low-level strike. Identification in most unit paperwork is made by silhouette and wing shape, supplemented by recognition codes circulated by area air commands. The aircraft is described repeatedly as a single-seat fighter with inverted gull wings, radial engine, and a large propeller, often appearing in sections or divisions within larger formations. In the Okinawa area, American land-based aviation begins to expand as airfields are secured and made serviceable. Japanese observation posts and air defense centers register increasing daytime air traffic originating from the island. Operational maps used by Japanese ground commands mark probable approach corridors over the sea lanes from the east and south. Air raid warnings are issued by siren and radio according to the established sequence: sighting report, confirmation, estimated time to target area, and instruction to personnel. In these warning chains, the Corsair is frequently named among aircraft types identified in the incoming formations, particularly when the formation conducts low-level passes over coastal zones and inland road networks. Japanese air units flying from southern Kyushu execute sorties to reach the Okinawa anchorage and to locate American carrier groups. The sortie paperwork records fuel allocations, planned routes, expected radio procedures, and emergency landing instructions. Where aircraft are available, missions launch in small packets due to limited serviceable airframes and constraints on fuel and spares. After takeoff, pilots report position by time and bearing, using coastal references where visibility permits. Many mission logs record the first contact with enemy fighters before the assigned route reaches the intended search or attack line. In these entries, the Corsair is commonly listed as the first aircraft type to initiate contact, usually from above or from the sun line, followed by further contacts as the formation breaks up. Air combat debriefing sheets produced after return to base list the first sighting altitude, estimated enemy numbers, direction of attack, and the sequence of maneuvers used. Japanese pilots frequently record that the Corsair begins the engagement by a diving pass, then climbs back to regain altitude. Several debriefings note that the American fighter does not remain in a horizontal turning engagement at low speed. The debriefings remain within the standard language of the forms: enemy attacked from high rear, enemy disengaged in climb, unable to close, lost sight, return due to fuel, aircraft damaged, pilot wounded, and similar entries. Where the pilot reports subjective reaction, it appears as part of the debriefing record, with phrasing such as, pilot reported surprise at enemy speed during dive or pilot reported difficulty estimating closure rate. Airfield defense logs in Kyushu and the Western Home Islands register Corsair attacks during American strikes on air installations, port facilities, and transportation lines. Each log entry typically includes date, time, estimated number of aircraft, approach direction, altitude band, and observed ordnance or gunfire. Personnel tasked with aircraft recognition consult silhouette cards posted in command posts and operations rooms. When the Corsair is identified, the entry often includes the term bent wing or the Japanese descriptive equivalent used in field notes. Anti-aircraft batteries record firing data by time block, listing number of rounds expended, fuse setting where applicable, and barrel changes. Observed results are entered cautiously, using terms such as enemy aircraft observed trailing smoke, enemy aircraft turned away, or possible hit, without confirmation unless a crash is observed. Japanese aircraft maintenance and repair sections continue to document damage sustained during engagements. Where returning aircraft have been hit, the repair log lists impacts by station, with sketches showing penetrations through skin panels, frames, and control surfaces. In several reports connected to Corsair encounters, the damage pattern is consistent with multiple heavy-caliber impacts across wing roots, forward fuselage, and engine cowling. These logs describe the repair actions taken: patching, spar inspection, replacement of control cables, sealing of fuel lines, and engine run-up tests after repairs. The logs state time to repair in man-hours and list parts taken from stock or cannibalized from other aircraft. For aircraft that do not return, the unit loss roster lists last known position, time, mission, and any witness report received by radio or from other pilots. In May 1945, American carrier operations in the waters south of Japan continue, and Japanese reconnaissance and interception units record repeated contacts with carrier-based fighters. The Corsair is present in the air defense layer above the task force and also appears in strike packages. Japanese reconnaissance attempts are logged as departing from coastal bases and proceeding along planned search patterns. Many of these missions note early interception, with the Corsair identified as part of the intercepting group. Debriefings record that the intercept occurs at altitude, followed by the American fighters pushing the Japanese aircraft down or away from the patrol line. Reconnaissance photography is often not obtained, and mission results are entered as no observation due to interception or partial observation, with brief notes on ship silhouettes seen at range. For Japanese units tasked with intercepting American strikes, the operational day is structured around alert states. Aircraft are placed on readiness lines with pilots near their machines, engines prepared for rapid start, and fuel loads adjusted to expected mission duration. When radar or observer reports indicate inbound aircraft, scramble orders are given by radio and telephone to dispersal points. Flight records show that scrambles frequently occur with limited time to climb before contact. In these circumstances, the first sighting of enemy fighters is recorded as being above the intercepting Japanese aircraft. After-action forms repeatedly note that Corsairs and other American fighters occupy the higher altitude band and begin diving passes on climbing interceptors. During the Okinawa operation, American Corsair units also conduct close air support and battlefield interdiction, and Japanese ground reporting captures these flights through the effects observed on roads, supply areas, and troop movement corridors. Field reports from Japanese ground units include time-stamped entries of strafing and rocket attacks. When the aircraft is identified as a Corsair, the report may cite the wing shape and the engine profile. These reports describe casualties, damage to vehicles, destroyed carts, and disrupted movement. They also list the condition of communication lines, including telephone wires cut by fire or by movement of damaged poles. Staff officers compile these reports into daily summaries, listing incidents by district and time. Japanese Air Command communications include repeated reminders to maintain strict discipline in reporting enemy aircraft types. Where misidentification has occurred in earlier reports, later directives instruct units to use the standard recognition code and to include the basis of identification, silhouette, wing planform, engine type, or observed tactics. Some bulletins include simple checklists: inverted gull wing indicates Corsair, straight wing with radial engine indicates other types, twin tail indicates specific twin-engine types. The bulletins are distributed through chain-of-command channels to operational units and training schools. As June 1945 begins, American strikes on Kyushu and the Inland Sea region continue. Japanese airfields in Kyushu experience repeated attacks aimed at aircraft on the ground and at runways. Corsairs appear in airfield logs as part of low-level strike elements. The sequence recorded in these logs commonly includes first a high-altitude overflight by larger aircraft, then the arrival of fighter bombers and fighters at low altitude. Airfield personnel enter the number of attack runs and note the pattern of strafing along dispersal areas. Damage reports list burned aircraft, punctured fuel drums, and damaged hangars. Firefighting teams record water usage, foam usage where available, and the time required to bring fires under control. Medical sections record casualties among ground crews and guard units. Japanese fighter units attempt to contest these raids. Scramble orders are issued as warning times permit. Flight logs record the climb and heading, then note the first contact and the rapid onset of combat. In several debriefings, pilots report that Corsairs approach from high rear or from lateral positions with high closure speed. The Japanese forms record the number of passes observed and note that the enemy aircraft often does not remain within effective firing range after the initial pass. Some reports note that when a Corsair is fired upon, the aircraft continues its maneuver and departs at speed, with no immediate change observed. Other reports note brief moments of smoke or debris, entered as hit observed, without confirmation of loss. Japanese units equipped with different fighter types record slightly different engagement circumstances, but the reporting format remains consistent. Where a unit operates high-performance interceptors, the debriefing may include an attempt to reach the American fighters at altitude. Where a unit operates older or more heavily loaded aircraft, the reports more often describe attempts to attack bombers while evading escort fighters. In these narratives, the Corsair is recorded as remaining close to the bomber stream or patrolling above it, then diving to engage when the Japanese aircraft approaches. The debriefing sheets list the time of contact and the immediate consequence, damage, separation, or loss of formation. Special attack sortie records, where preserved in unit paperwork, list planned route and target area, as well as the expected opposition. These records often include warnings of Corsair patrols and note expected interception points based on prior experience. After-action entries from escorts or from surviving aircraft record that the American fighter screen engages early. Corsair activity is noted at altitudes above the approach route and also at low altitude near the fleet anchorage, where fighters conduct patrols over the ship concentration. Observers on the ground or on remaining ships log aircraft overhead, sometimes noting the inverted gull wing when visibility allows. Japanese radar stations and air defense centers continue to track inbound formations using available equipment, though coverage and reliability vary. Plotting boards in command posts record bearing and range, and controllers issue vectors to fighter units when communication is possible. In many cases, contact reports indicate that fighters reached the intercept point after enemy aircraft has already attacked primary targets. Where fighters do make contact, the controller log records the time of first engagement and any radio transmissions received. Corsairs are identified in some logs by code designation rather than by name, following the practice of using standardized enemy aircraft codes in operational communication. Throughout June 1945, reports from maritime areas note Corsair patrols over shipping lanes and coastal waters. Japanese coastal observers record aircraft passing along the shoreline at low altitude, with occasional strafing of small vessels. The reports list the number of aircraft and direction of travel, and in some cases note that the aircraft appears to be operating from carriers based on the observed flight path out to sea. Japanese shipping loss reports and Port Authority reports list damage to barges, fishing boats, and small transports, with cause recorded as aerial strafing where consistent with observed effects. In the Inland Sea region, Japanese naval and civilian authorities maintain logs of air activity over shipyards, ports, and anchorages. These logs record times of air raid warnings, the sound of aircraft engines, and the observed impact points of ordnance. Corsairs are identified in some entries as low-level fighters accompanying larger strike aircraft. Anti-aircraft units in these regions record firing sequences and note the difficulty of tracking low-level fighters moving rapidly across the field of fire. When aircraft is seen pulling up sharply after a run, observers note the climb angle and exit direction, entering these details as part of the routine incident report. Japanese intelligence sections continue to compile contact reports into consolidated summaries. These summaries are distributed to air groups and district commands. The documents include tables listing dates, locations, and aircraft types encountered, with the Corsair frequently appearing. The narrative portions of these summaries are generally limited to listing observed tactical patterns: attack from altitude, high-speed pass, climb, repeated pass if opportunity permits, and disengagement. Where pilots submit remarks on the perceived speed of the aircraft, the intelligence summary reproduces the remark as a quotation or paraphrase within the report, without additional commentary by the compiler. In July 1945, American carrier strikes intensify against targets in the Japanese home islands. Japanese air and ground reporting expands in volume. Air raid logs in multiple districts record daily raids or near-daily air activity. Corsairs are identified among fighters present during these operations. Reports from airfields note that the aircraft type appears in both escort and attack roles. Entries record the sequence of events: warning, scramble, bombardment, strafing, fires, and damage assessment. Japanese air units attempt to concentrate remaining aircraft for defensive operations. Movement orders transfer aircraft between fields, often at night or under weather cover where possible. These movement operations are themselves subject to attack, and some movement logs record being engaged by Corsairs during ferry flights or during takeoff and landing phases. Airfield diaries note aircraft destroyed on the ground during such attacks and list the immediate actions taken: dispersal to tree lines, camouflage nets, and the relocation of fuel stores away from the runway area. Debriefings from July engagements frequently note that Corsairs appear at higher altitude than many Japanese defensive fighters can reach in time. In the debriefing language, this is recorded as "enemy maintained height advantage" or "enemy remained above during approach." Several reports note that when Japanese fighters attempt to climb to the enemy formation, they are engaged during the climb by Corsairs diving through the formation. The reports list the number of enemy passes observed and the time between passes. Where Japanese pilots attempt to counter by remaining low and attacking when the enemy descends, the reports record brief firing opportunities during crossing engagements, followed by separation. Japanese ground observers report that Corsairs also conduct attacks on rail yards, bridges, and road junctions. Field reports list the time of each attack and describe the damage: severed rails, cratered roadbeds, destroyed trucks, and casualties among repair crews. Engineering units record repair work performed immediately after raids, including filling craters, replacing sleepers, and restoring signal lines. These entries are written as work logs and do not include interpretive statements beyond the recorded tasks. Within command posts, staff officers maintain situation maps showing the status of airfields, fuel depots, and transportation nodes. After each day's raids, new damage reports are pinned or filed, and updated summaries are transmitted to higher headquarters. Corsair appearances are recorded within these summaries as part of the enemy air order of battle observed for that day. Where a district experiences multiple raids in a single day, the summaries list each raid separately with time blocks. Japanese training and replacement centers continue to receive partial information from combat units. Instructors integrate the latest recognition material, emphasizing the distinctive wing and the likely attack profile of the Corsair. Training flights, where conducted, include practice in lookout procedures and emergency evasive maneuvers. Training documents list standard phrases to be used in contact reports and provide examples of correct aircraft identification entries. These documents are circulated in mimeographed form to maintain consistency. Medical and personnel sections record losses among aircrew and ground personnel. Pilot casualty lists include name, rank, unit, mission date, and status. Where a pilot is lost in combat involving Corsairs, the report often notes, engaged enemy fighters, aircraft did not return, and records last known position if available. For wounded personnel, medical logs list injury type and treatment given, including transfusions, surgery, and evacuation where possible. These records remain administrative and factual. As raids continue through July, Japanese civil defense organizations also maintain incident logs. These logs record air raid warnings, shelter use, fires, and damage to residential areas when raids impact populated zones. When aircraft is visible at low altitude, observers sometimes identify the Corsair, and the record notes the aircraft type and direction. Fire brigades record response times and equipment used. Police and local officials record the movement of evacuees and the condition of roads and bridges after attacks. Japanese naval personnel at remaining anchorages and shipyards record aircraft attacks on ships, cranes, and dock facilities. Corsairs are identified in some reports as strafing and making repeated passes along the length of ships. Damage control logs on ships list the time of impact, compartments affected, and firefighting measures. Where ships are under construction or repair, yard logs record damage to hull sections, equipment, and stored materials. These logs are compiled without summaries that extend beyond the immediate day's damage and repair status. At the same time, Japanese signals units continue to report interruptions and restorations of communication lines. After raids, line repair parties record lengths of wire replaced and poles repaired. In some reports, the cause of interruption is entered as strafing or bombing, with aircraft type recorded if observed. These records are incorporated into district-level communications reports. Across these districts, the Corsair remains present in the daily operational record. Its appearance is noted in fighter engagement reports, airfield raid logs, ground observation reports, anti-aircraft firing logs, reconnaissance mission debriefings, and intelligence summaries. In each case, the documentation records the immediate circumstances, time, place, altitude, direction, number of aircraft, and observed actions. Where the individual pilot or observer records a reaction such as surprise or difficulty estimating closure speed, it is preserved as part of the debriefing entry, alongside the more strictly procedural fields. The administrative machinery of reporting continues to collect these entries, file them by date and location, and forward them along the chain of command as ongoing operations generate new contacts and new losses. From late July 1945, Japanese air and ground reporting continues in routine formats as American carrier and land-based aircraft conduct repeated strikes over the home islands and remaining Japanese-held positions. Corsairs are identified in multiple districts during these raids, appearing in airfield logs, anti-aircraft firing records, shipping incident reports, and fighter unit debriefings. Identification continues to rely on silhouette recognition, particularly the inverted gull wing, radial engine profile, and the aircraft's frequent use of diving attacks followed by rapid climb or withdrawal. Operational paperwork preserves these identifications as part of standard enemy aircraft type entries. In Kyushu and Shikoku, district air defense centers maintain plotting boards and logbooks recording bearings, ranges, and time blocks of inbound formations as reported by radar stations, coastal observers, and communications posts. Where radar coverage is incomplete or degraded, observers provide the primary warning chain. The warning sequence is recorded in control logs: initial sighting, confirmation, the issuance of scramble orders, and the transmission of raid information to civil authorities and base commanders. Corsairs are listed among fighter elements accompanying larger strike formations or operating independently at low altitude along coastal routes. Japanese fighter units assigned to air defense continue to operate under fuel and aircraft constraints. Readiness rosters show limited numbers of serviceable aircraft, with maintenance sections rotating engines, salvaging parts, and managing reduced spares. Scramble records show that many sorties launch with partial complement and varied climb performance. In multiple debriefings, pilots report that the first enemy contact occurs while still climbing, and that Corsairs are present above the intercepting fighters. The debriefing forms record time, altitude at first sighting, estimated enemy numbers, direction of attack, and the sequence of passes observed. The written entries remain consistent with established format, listing engagement details without narrative expansion beyond the required fields. Airfield raid logs in southern Japan record repeated low-level strafing runs against dispersal areas, runway shoulders, fuel points, and parked aircraft. When Corsairs are identified, the log entry includes the estimated number of fighters and the direction of approach and exit. Damage assessment sheets prepared after each raid list destroyed aircraft by tail number where available, damaged aircraft by repair category, and facilities damaged by gunfire or fragmentation. Firefighting records list ignition points, time to containment, and materials used. Medical section logs list wounded personnel and immediate treatment, with evacuation noted where transport is possible. Shipping and port authorities maintain incident logs for coastal waters and harbors. As American air activity increases against maritime targets, observers record fighter patrols and attacks on small craft, barges, and coastal transports. Where aircraft are identified as Corsairs, the entries note low-altitude approach, strafing runs along the length of a vessel, and the resulting damage such as punctured hull plating, fires in fuel stores, and casualties among crews. Port repair logs list actions taken: patching holes, pumping flooded compartments, moving damaged vessels to shallower water, and clearing debris from piers and channels. Communications units record repeated interruptions to telephone and telegraph lines after raids. Repair party logs include time dispatched, distance traveled, length of wire replaced, and the number of poles repaired. In some districts, the cause of interruption is recorded as strafing along road corridors, with aircraft type noted when observed. These communications logs are incorporated into daily district summaries and forwarded upward through established administrative channels. On Honshu, air raid reporting increases as raids reach deeper inland targets. Civil defense organizations maintain incident reports documenting air raid warning times, shelter use, fires, and structural damage. Where fighters are seen at low altitude, observers sometimes identify the Corsair by wing shape and report this through local reporting chains. Police and municipal authorities record evacuations, road obstructions, and the status of bridges and rail crossings after attacks. Engineering units record repair tasks on tracks, roadbeds, and power lines, listing materials used and time required to restore limited service. Japanese anti-aircraft batteries continue to document firing data in battery logs. These logs list the time of engagement, target altitude estimate, bearing, the number of rounds fired, and fuse settings where applicable. Observers record apparent hits cautiously, using standard terms such as smoke observed, aircraft altered course, or possible strike, without confirmation unless a crash is observed and located. When Corsairs perform low-altitude passes, some firing logs note limited engagement windows due to speed and terrain masking. Japanese intelligence sections compile daily and weekly summaries based on reports from air groups, ground observers, and district commands. These summaries include tabulated entries of enemy aircraft types observed by date and location. The Corsair appears regularly in these tables, listed alongside other American fighter types. Narrative portions, where included, consist primarily of chronological listing of raids, with emphasis on number of aircraft, target areas, and observed tactics. Where individual pilots report difficulty estimating closure speed or note unexpected approach angles, these remarks are preserved as part of the source report content, without additional commentary by the compiler. In late July and early August 1945, Japanese reconnaissance attempts to locate American task forces continue. Sortie records show planned search lines and radio procedures. Many missions record early interception by enemy fighters and subsequent mission termination due to damage, fuel constraints, or inability to reach observation points. Corsairs are identified in numerous intercept reports, frequently described as approaching from above and initiating attacks before the reconnaissance aircraft can reach visual range of ships. Debriefings list the point of first contact, the direction of enemy approach, and the decision to return based on aircraft status and fuel. Japanese fighter bomber and special attack sorties attempted during this period are documented in unit rosters and mission sheets. These records list takeoff time, intended target area, route, and expected opposition. Escorts, where present, provide post-mission summaries noting the point at which the formation was engaged by enemy fighters. Corsairs are frequently recorded among the fighter screen encountered near the approaches to fleet anchorages and along likely flight paths over water. Engagement notes include the number of enemy fighters seen, the altitude band, and the dispersal of the formation after contact. Loss rosters list aircraft that did not return, last known position if reported, and any witness observations received by radio. As raids continue, airfield movement orders attempt to disperse remaining aircraft to secondary strips, roads, or concealed revetments. Movement logs record departure times, planned arrival points, and fuel requirements. Some ferry flights record interception near destination fields and attacks during approach or landing. Airfield diaries list aircraft destroyed during such incidents and note the immediate response, towing wreckage off runway surfaces, filling craters, and re-establishing minimum operational length where possible. Camouflage and dispersal measures are logged as work tasks, including the placement of nets, relocation of fuel drums, and construction of additional earth revetments. Japanese maintenance sections continue to record damage patterns on returning aircraft. Repair logs list bullet impact points and the affected systems. Entries associated with Corsair engagements frequently note multiple penetrations of outer wing panels, fuselage side skins, and control surfaces. Fuel tank punctures and hydraulic line damage are recorded with subsequent repair actions. Engine inspection notes include compression checks, replacement of damaged cowling panels, and test runs. Man-hour totals for repairs are recorded alongside parts drawn from remaining inventories. In the first days of August 1945, operational reporting continues in the same procedural language. District summaries list raids by time and location, target areas, and observed aircraft types. Communications logs continue to note outages and restorations. Medical logs continue to record casualties from air attacks. Air defense centers continue to issue warnings and scramble orders when warning time permits. Corsairs remain present in the recorded fighter elements during multiple raids, with identification continuing to rely on the distinctive wing shape and observed attack sequence. On August 6, 1945, Japanese administrative and operational record-keeping continues, including air raid logging and communications reporting. District-level documents record routine air activity where observed and report damage and repair status for installations and transport lines. The reporting system continues to function in parallel with other urgent administrative tasks, with entries filed by date and location as received from subordinate units. On August 9, 1945, similar procedures continue in districts experiencing air activity. Air raid warnings, where issued, are logged. Damage and repair reports continue to be compiled as local conditions permit. Communications and transport status reports remain part of daily administrative traffic. Where raids occur, aircraft types are identified when visible. Where not visible, reports use general categories such as enemy aircraft without type identification. In mid-August 1945, Japanese command communications begin to include directives affecting flight operations, readiness states, and the handling of aircraft and equipment. Operational units receive orders through established channels and record them in unit diaries and administrative logs. Airfield commanders compile inventories of remaining aircraft and fuel. Maintenance sections record preservation or movement instructions where issued. Guard units record changes in alert posture and perimeter duties. These records maintain the same procedural tone as earlier entries, listing orders received and actions taken. As directives affecting the continuation of hostilities are transmitted through command structures, air units document changes to sortie status and readiness. Flight logs show reduced or halted launch activity where orders are implemented. Air defense centers record changes to warning and scramble procedures as instructed. Civil defense organizations continue to record local incidents, including fires, infrastructure damage, and the status of essential services, in the same incident log formats used throughout the preceding weeks. In the concluding days of the operational period covered by these records, Corsairs remain present in the most recent combat and raid logs where air activity continued up to the point of order changes. The documentation preserved from these final weeks consists of the same categories present earlier: fighter unit debriefings, reconnaissance mission reports, airfield raid logs, anti-aircraft firing records, shipping incident reports, communications repair logs, medical casualty records, civil defense incident reports, and intelligence summaries. Each document records immediate circumstances, time, place, aircraft type identification where possible, observed actions, and the administrative or operational response, without additional framing beyond the requirements of the reporting system.